Welcome, Pelican Harbor welcomes you to our adjacent marina room. Getting cues so I'm on camera. We're live streaming this, so we have a YouTube audience as well. If you're not already on our YouTube channel, if YouTube is something you venture onto, we would love for you to have you subscribe to our channel so that you get updates when we do lives. If you can't make it sometime, you'll see that we post all of our speaker series on there. All of our past speaker series are already there waiting for you. Couple of quick announcements. I think I checked in with everybody and made sure I know who's here tonight. It's not super important, it's just something we like to track so we know who to reach out to for future programs. Speaking of which, next month we have a program on native orchids. So if some of you have already signed up for that, and I'm excited to have that happen. Of course, exactly. Thank you, Andrea and Clark. But Jason Downing, our Fairchild Tropical Garden, he's in charge of the Million Orchid Project, and he's going to share about native orchids and how they're trying to put native orchids back in the habitat in South Florida, and how they grow and all kinds of science things about the orchids. Tonight, we're lucky enough to have
Andrea Miro.
I've been messing up with the first vowel center last name, Andrea Miro tonight with us of the Native Plant Network. She works with the EEL, Environmentally Endangered Lands program in Miami-Dade County. There's environmentally endangered lands all over the place. And we at Pelican Harbor are looking forward to partnering more with them in the future, but also wanted to make Native Plant Network available to our audience because, well, the food chain starts with the producers, and if you plant it, they will come. If you'll pardon the alteration of the movie line, right? If you plant it, they will come. And so if you put the right things in, you can build your own food chain. And honestly, that's our advice when we have birds of prey that come in with rodenticide poisoning. Right there, that's like if you let the food chain do its job, you don't need the rodenticide because the owls and the hawks will come and take care of any other problems you have. Just that. But if you want songbirds, if you want butterflies, if you want whatever pollinators, there's some really fun, cool, weird pollinators out there that are not the standard pollinators that you may think of. I'm sure you're going to share all about them. I've personally been a Native Plant Network member since well before it changed its name. And we're really looking forward to that, to learning more about that, sharing that with you. Additionally, while I still have your attention, I want to make sure everybody knows we have a number of seabird cruises available. If you've never been on a seabird cruise with us, we would love to have you. They're based around sunset. We live an hour before, we come back an hour after sunset. If you want more information, please talk to me after the program or look at our website. Also, every Saturday we have free behind-the-scenes tours, and so if you've never toured our facility, we would love to have you over our actual building and show you around and have you see some of the work that your support of just even being here tonight or on our YouTube live stream. All of that supports all of that, and so we really appreciate everything that you guys do to help South Florida wildlife. Without further ado.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much, Amy, for a really lovely introduction, and thank you, Pelican Harbor, for having me here today, and thank you all for being here. I'm really excited to talk to you all about the Native Plant Network, which is an outreach program that is based out of Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden. So it is a branch of the conservation team at Fairchild, and we're doing really cool and really fun stuff there, and I'm very excited to share it with you all today. So just a little kind of agenda for today's presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the bigger picture, like how we started getting to the Native Plant Network, and how it started and what it's there for, and then I'll get more into kind of the nitty-gritty of what the network actually is, and all of the different features that it has, and how you all can get engaged in it if you'd like to. So the first thing I will start with is this right here. Who here, raise your hand if you know what this habitat is or if you've heard of it before. Nice, okay. A good amount of hands are up, about 50%, I would say. So this is the pine marshland. This is one of the main habitats in South Florida. and it's a very special habitat. It is, it hosts a lot of really beautiful and exceptional plant species and very rare and endemic plant species. In addition to some very characteristic South Florida wildlife, including the Florida bonneted bat and the Bartram scrub hair streak. These are some of the endangered some of the endangered animals that are within the pine rockland. And its range is very limited, which is one of the reasons why it's so special. It is really only found in South Florida and in a couple of islands in the Caribbean. So this gives you an idea of the historic range of the pine rocklands outside. I mean, we here it says it shows Everglades National Park, but you get a much better sense of what's in urban kind of Miami-Dade. This is the historic range. So we have a lot of pine rocklands, and it forms on this limestone outcropping called the Miami Rock Ridge, which is a natural elevation gain of about 10 to 20 feet in elevation gain, and that's what makes this habitat kind of so unique, that it's only found on that sort of geographic area. And this is an image of what Miami looks like now, right? The little red star indicates kind of where we are. Yes?
The lighting is kind of tough on the screen.
Yeah.
Turn those off.
Do you want to?
Yeah.
It felt awfully too dark to do that.
That's
That's okay?
Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah? Can you still see me okay on the lives on the?
No, but it's okay. We can hear you.
Okay. Anyway. Great. So here's a picture of what Miami looks like now. Not a lot of greenery, right? And does anyone want to take a guess about how, like, what percentage-wise we have left of our pine rocklands? 2%. Wow. You guys are close. Yeah. We have got less than 1.2% of our pine rocklands left down here in South Florida. And that's a pretty staggering number. And unfortunately, this really rampant decrease is not just for the pine rocklands, but also for a lot of the other habitats that we have down here in South Florida. So things like tropical hardwood hammocks and even our mangrove forests and our wetlands. With the development of Miami, we've seen a really big loss of these very important habitats that not only house really special plants, but also house a lot of the beautiful wildlife and characteristic wildlife that we have down here. So a quick mention, these little green kind of dots, I would say, that are scattered mostly throughout the bottom half of Miami-Dade County are primarily owned by a county program called the Environmentally Endangered Lands Program. And this is a program that I work really closely with. They do exceptional work because their main mission is to acquire, protect, and maintain endangered lands of South Florida. So right now, they actually own and manage over, I would say, 29,000 acres of endangered and natural land down here in our county. So that's amazing, right? But the work is very challenging, as you can imagine. You have to buy property, you have to protect it, you have to manage it, which can be very challenging. And you have to know how to manage it in a way that is considerate of the plants, but also of the animals that are living in these preserves. A quick little plug, I would say. The EO program has public volunteer work days throughout the year. And if you're interested in engaging more with these endangered lands of South Florida, please, this is the best way to do it. See me after the talk. I'm happy to talk to you more about it. It's a really neat program to get out there into these lands. So here's just a little bit of, this gives you an idea of kind of where these endangered land preserves are. And these little dots right here in this area of the county are mostly pine rocklands. But they've got pine rocklands, they've got coastal strand, they've got scrub habitat, they've got wetlands, they've got mangroves. So they really manage a lot of these very important preserves. So this brings us, I'm going to go back really quickly. So this situation right here, where we've only got about 1.2% left of our pine rocklands, left us in a situation in 2007 with folks at Fairchild being really concerned for our pine rocklands. And so the solution was to say, hey, well, maybe we don't have to just have pine rocklands in these preserves. Maybe we can take the plants that are at pine rocklands and plant them in our yards. And that will also attract the animals and the beetles and the insects and the butterflies and all the critters that are also in these preserves, right? So our original name was actually Connect to Protect, which, you know, kind of served as like, okay, we're gonna make these little garden preserves, I guess you could say, or personal garden preserves, and that those things would protect and connect this very fragmented ecosystem. Then we had a little bit of an issue, which is that the county rolled out their sewage, septic to sewage program and also called it Connect to Protect.
Oh my God.
So we've got a little bit of a competing name here. But that also allowed us to take a step back and say, okay, how can we make this program a bit more accessible to all, a bit more focused not just on pine rocklands, but on all of these really special habitats in South Florida, right? So with that came our name change, which is now the Native Plant Network. You can see our logo is right down here. And our main push is to have native plants cover Miami-Dade County, and to have people and the residents of Miami-Dade County understand why these native plants are important and why we should have them and all of the amazing benefits that they provide, not just to us, but to all of our wildlife friends, right? Now the Native Plant Network has also expanded a little bit into Monroe County, which is very exciting. But to kind of remain focused on Miami-Dade County, do you all remember that map with the remaining parcels of pine rocklands? Very few, right? Well, this is what it looks like when you add in our Native Plant Network gardens. Oh, okay, that's how it was before. Here it is after.
Nice.
Yeah. So all of these little pink dots are Native Plant Network members who ideally have gardens in their yards, or even just these plants, you know, they don't have to be like perfectly manicured or anything. No, it's just having the plants there, because that serves, if you think about it, this serves as like a web, essentially, connecting a lot of these pine rockland parcels to other parcels, right? And similarly,
We gotta join this.
yeah.
We have a lot of good plans though.
So this is really special, and it also means that people who are walking around their neighborhood, for example, can walk past a garden or walk past a yard and say, hey, this is a gorgeous yard. What type of yard is this? And they'll say, or they'll see that it's a Native Plant Network yard and get a little bit more engaged in what plants we're putting out, you know, in our yards. So thanks to all these little gardens and yards, we've essentially made stepping stones throughout the county. So to give you an idea as to what the Native Plant Network looks like now, we've had a really big growth in the past few years, in a large part to the wonderful work of my colleague Daniela Champley. And we have done a lot of outreach, a lot of education, and a lot of especially social media stuff, you know, just engaging people across different ages and in different mediums and all sorts of things. The Native Plant Network now has over 2,000 members that are homeowners. And we've also started to partner a lot with schools. And we've used a lot of the infrastructure already that Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden already has in schools to facilitate that. And more and more we're reaching out, but also we are getting requests from churches, from homeowners associations, from municipalities and towns saying, hey, we've got a right of way and we really want to make it native, or, we've got this parking lot and we've got some little trees here, but we really want to put in native things. And so that's when the Native Plant Network can really come into those areas and help bring in natives to these public spaces, which is really special. So a little bit about what being a member actually looks like. It starts off with a starter kit, which is essentially a package of 5 native plants and a yard sign. And the idea is that you plant these pretty quickly into either your yard or, now we also are more open to, say, native plants in pots and stuff like that, depending on if people have balconies or patios or areas where they can't necessarily plant into the ground. But nonetheless, you're getting these plants. In theory, you're putting them into the ground and keeping them alive, right? Which, because they're native plants, isn't actually that challenging, right? They require a lot less maintenance than a lot of the exotic and tropical plants that we often see in landscaping, because these plants are adapted to growing in these conditions. They like the fact that it's super rainy in the summer, and they like the fact that it's super dry in the winter, They like the fact that the soil is actually sand or just rock. They're fine with that, Another thing about the Native Plant Network is that we really engage with our members, and that can look that can be in a lot of different ways, depending on how much the members want to engage with us. But being part of the Native Plant Network means that you have the opportunity to be part of a citizen science project, essentially, community, And I'm going to talk a bit more about what that means in further down in my presentation. But this is something that really sets us apart, I would say, from just going to your local native nursery and buying cool native plants. You get a community here, you get advice, you get help from other NPN members. You are, if you want to, you can track what birds are coming into your garden, and you can track which plants are fruiting at different times, and you can collect seeds and send them back to us. And there's a whole host of different things that we do with our members, relying on our members. In addition to that, we have events, and we lead field trips. And we sometimes do yard visits, which are really fun, because then you get to go to other Native Plant Network member yards and see, how they set up their garden and all that stuff. And we also have a monthly newsletter where we talk a lot about kind of the bigger picture and why what you're doing in your garden or your yard why it's so meaningful. And also we talk a lot about the citizen science work that we do. So just a couple of pictures and kind of examples of what this looks like. It can look a lot of different ways, because obviously plants take a long time to grow. But actually this garden right here is about 1.5 blocks from my house. And that's it's a spectacular garden. It's got all sorts of different types of native plants and shrubs and herbaceous cover, and I walk by every time I go out for a walk, I walk by and I'm like, oh, this is so lovely. This is what I'd like all of Miami to look like. So this is some of the work that we do in schools, which I think is really important, because engaging with our youth, I feel like we've all heard that so many times, but engaging with our youth is so important. And the thing about the Native Plant Network that makes it so special is the fact that it is a community, right? Because you can go and buy native plants at a native nursery or, pretty much that. But being a part of the Native Plant Network also means that you're investing kind of in the work that the conservation team at Fairchild does. And the way in which that happens, the way in which we take the work that we do at Fairchild's on Fairchild's conservation team and apply that to the Native Plant Network is best described when I tell you all about how we actually make the plants that we're giving out to our members. So all of the plants that we give out are grown in-house at Fairchild's Conservation Nursery. And what that means is that oftentimes we are giving out plants that are rare, sometimes endangered, sometimes very highly specialized for particular types of habitats. And most often, these aren't plants that you can find at your native nurseries. You know, these are really cool and niche and kind of challenging plants to propagate and grow, and they're at your disposal to put in your yard, you know. Oftentimes it also means that these plants have really unique relationships with a lot of wildlife, right? So it gives you kind of this foot up, I guess, or this leg up rather, to see really beautiful environmental kind of dynamics and relationships. So the seeds that we get to actually make, you know, sow and propagate these plants come either from county preserves, so from areas like the Endangered Lands Program, or from private yards, from our other Native Plant Network members saying, hey, I have this, you know, this plant that gave seed and I'm giving some back to you guys. Once we get those seeds or collect those seeds, they go through cleaning and counting and sorting and storage and all this whole big process at the Fairchild Conservation Seed Lab. And a lot of these seeds are actually being stored for the future, pretty much, so that if we want to do restoration work in the future, we can literally open the freezer and say, okay, you know, we've got seeds of X plant, we're gonna thaw them out and put them in soil and grow them, right? While those seeds are in the seed lab, we're also doing research on them, which is super cool because oftentimes these aren't plants that are being researched. So we know very little about these plants. We're learning what it takes to store them, what it takes to germinate them, and what sorts of things we have to do to the seeds to get them to actually grow and grow successfully. And so once we do all of that, we grow these plants at the nursery, and then we have a big distribution event so that members of the Native Plant Network can come and pick out which plants they'd like and how they essentially learn what plants are best suited for what environments, and then they can pick out the plants that they'd like. So here's a very, very sweet picture of one of our Native Plant Network families. This is one of their children picking out a Vulture's ground cherry. And this kind of goes to show that the Native Plant Network is trying to encourage not only having native plants in Miami-Dade County, but it's also trying to encourage people to feel connected to the land that we're on, connected to where we are, and also connected to the plants and the animals that we share this land with, right? And that is a unique challenge here in South Florida. Miami is a very large city, and it is growing exponentially every day. And it has grown massively in the past 100 years, and it's a very transient place. You have people kind of coming and going, and this history of migration is very part of this city, right? But that doesn't always mean that the folks who are here have really deep roots here, right? So I'd like to do a little activity. It's very short, but raise your hand if you were born here in Miami. Raise your hand if you were born in Miami. All right, we've got 2 people. I wasn't even born in Miami, so I can't even raise my hand. But yeah, 2 people. All right, now, were your parents born here? No, and I'm gonna say no. Your parents weren't born here, right? Yeah. So our collective kind of knowledge of what a place like Miami looked like 20 years ago versus 50 years ago versus 75 years ago versus 100 years ago, right? We've lost so much of that. And so getting our environment back to, the habitats that were here and the plants that were here and the animals that were here is really important to feeling connected to this place. And likewise, we've also kind of lost the knowledge of what was here, what was abundant, what sorts of things were common to walk outside your door and see, right? And this really, this is really what I'd say links the citizen science aspect of the Native Plant Network, is that we know very little about the rare butterflies and the rare beetles and the migratory birds coming through Miami. And the Native Plant Network is one of the communities in which we learn so much more about those things. So there we go. So as Amy said, if you plant it, it will come. And that's exactly right. So Native Plant Network members have seen so many wonderful and cool types of wildlife in their gardens. We've got prairie warblers, for example, and all sorts of migratory birds, Atala butterflies, that's a kind of classic butterfly down here, and even things like, even birds like great egrets coming through and looking for food. And wildlife obviously needs shelter, it needs water sources, it needs food, and our native yards can serve as houses for these wildlife, or at least as little kind of stepping stones or corridors as they move through preserves in the county. And a super neat example of this is the story of the Florida dusky wing. So this is an imperiled subspecies of butterfly found only here in Florida, in South Florida. It's got these really gorgeous, kind of dark gray, purple, blue colors on its wings. And its host plant is called locustberry, which is this plant right here, and it's got these really pretty collection of flowers. And the locustberry is really typically found in pine rocklands, but with rampant development in Miami and the loss of so much pine rocklands, we see very, very little locustberry around our county. So we always assumed that the population had really declined because of the destruction of pine rocklands. And this was until 2019, when we had a Native Plant Network member called Tina spot one of these Florida dusky wings in her yard, hanging out around her locustberry. And that got us thinking, what other members have seen Florida dusky wings in their yards? So since 2019, we've collected actual photo evidence of Florida dusky wing sightings, both at Native Plant Network yards and also on environmentally endangered lands reserves. And you can see all of these dots, all of these kind of icons are spottings of Florida dusky wings. So you see that they're here, for example, in these public endangered lands preserves, and they're also here in Native Plant Network yards. And you could almost kind of assume, or maybe not assume is the right word, but you could almost kind of see that these yards are serving as kind of webs for these endangered or imperiled butterflies to move throughout, southern Miami-Dade. That's so cool. Imagine sitting in your porch and you look out at your locustberry and, there you go. You see one of the rare butterflies in South Florida. So that's just one example. We've got lots of other ones. And in fact, that whole, story with the Florida dusky wing got us thinking about what other sorts of animals do we want to be looking out for? And so we've come up with these posters called Critters Wanted, and we have Critters Wanted 1 and Critters Wanted 2.0. And we've got things like the Bartram Scrub hair streak, which is the butterfly that I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation. But other things, the faithful beauty moth, Florida dusky wing, lesser wasp moth, yellow banded wasp moth, and a lot of these hosts are things that we actively give out. Pineland croton, devil's potato, locust berry, quailberry, man of the brown. Like, these are things that our members are actively getting and putting in their yard and watching grow and then get eaten away by little caterpillars. So it's very, very cool. This was actually the results. We did kind of a poll through our newsletter for our members of whether or not they've seen the faithful beauty moth. And this is our poll. About half of them had been like, no, we haven't seen that. And then the other half had said, half of them had said, maybe, we're not really sure. But the other half had said, yes, actually, believe it or not. We've seen the faithful beauty moth. And then we said, well, do you want the host plant? And pretty much everyone except one person was like, yes, we want it. So that's an example of how we engage with our members to tap into their observations, their curiosity, their knowledge about their gardens and their native yards, and also encourage people to plant the stuff that's gonna get these really special and cool butterflies and birds and bees and insects into our yards, right? And here's another example. We asked, we had a poll for eastern screech owls and the Chuck's-Will's widow, right? I don't know if we've gotten the results for these yet. But I hope I've done enough to convince you that you all should join the Native Plant Network. If you're interested, if you have space. So if you'd like to join, the kind of requirements are that you either live in Miami-Dade County or Monroe County, and that you're able to kind of maintain the plants for at least a year. The idea is that, we're giving you these living things. We want them in the ground to keep living. If they just kind of hang out in your yard in the pot that it came in and then dies after 2 months, then that's not really doing exactly what we want. And the other thing that we ask for is obviously not to use pesticides, as that kind of defeats the point of having these native plants that are host plants and larval host plants. And last but not least, the membership is free, which is a great perk, So if you're interested in joining, I would send you over to the Native Plant Network website at Fairchild Gardens website. You can scan the QR code here, or I also have brochures up front that I'm happy to hand out. And I'd like to, there we go. Thank you all so much. Are there any questions? Now that the lights are coming back on.
So how does it actually work with it? How does it actually work with the picking up of the plants?
Yeah, so we have distribution events. So these are, grain of salt, because I'm not the one that actually schedules these distribution events, but they're usually, I would say, every month or every 2 months or something like that. And it's a window that you come to Fairchild and you drive up, and there's a table essentially with all the different plants that we're giving out. And we have information about what sorts of places these plants like to be in. So some need full shade, well, very few need full shade. Most need full sun. There are some that can do with partial sun. There's some that can be in more shady spots. There's some that really need a wet soil, stuff like that. So then you kind of pick the ones that you'd like, given what you have available in your space, and then we just bring you your plants, and then you take them home and put them in the ground.
Yeah,
It's not very easy.
one of the other benefits that I've personally benefited from, not to use the word, but when you've been a member for a while, after you first buy plants, then once a year, they offer an opportunity to pick up even more plants.
Yeah.
For a small fee, but that covers the soil and the potting, and that's about it. But this year, they also added a beautiful education event, which, as the wildlife educator here at Pelican Harbor, I am very partial to anything that's an education event. So they educate people. That one was great because, and I don't know if the new member ones work the same way, but for the been a member for a while ones, you got a website of listings and plant information and what things it will attract and all kinds of information. So you could really just sit at home and digest and, oh, I think I want this one, and which are my 5 top plants that I want, and what are my 2 alternates, and you sign up that way and that way. And I showed up, I said, here's my name, they checked me off the list and said, here's your plants, and go. So it's really well done, it's a wonderful program, I wouldn't have it here if I didn't think so, but the education piece is really phenomenal.
Yeah.
So
Thank you, Amy. And actually, this year we had our kind of first Native Plant Network Day at the garden. So not only were members, encouraged to come and pick up plants, but then you could also hang around. And we had members of the conservation team, my coworkers, Nick, for example, who's the manager of the seed lab, he was giving tours of the seed lab. We had another coworker of mine, Noah, who's a wildlife biologist, who was talking about birds and native plants and migratory birds and all sorts of things. And so that was a great, event too, if you really want to get out of your car and meet people and talk to the folks running the Native Plant Network and engage on an even deeper level. So, yeah. Any other questions? All right, guess I did a good job. I have brochures up here. So if you'd like a brochure, I can bring them to you. Yeah, for sure. And I also have my card. If you're interested, if anyone has any other follow-up questions, I'm happy to.
So what do you do for so much energy?